Welcome back to our coverage here at I-61, Team Fortress 2. I'm here with my very close friends, eepily, nuze.
How you doing, Getawhale?
I'm doing great, and thanks for sticking with us on the stream, by the way, as we got something ironed out there. So why don't we talk about all that stuff? We didn't get a chance to analyze in between maps, but I saw you guys here preparing. You got tons of notes and stuff, so I mean, why don't you take it away? I mean, what are your takeaways from that first series?
Yeah, well, in terms of broad strokes, you could see general playstyle of each team. We're going along the lines of very, very, very conservative. We're talking a lot like at least the old Crown 7 kind of playstyle. We're seeing very little of what you'd call kind of dodgy pushes, dodgy engagements. Ascent in particular played an awful lot around their medic, focusing a lot on the Uber percentages, and even frequently they'd have a medic alive, they'd have heal advantage, and they wouldn't deem that enough. They were so focused on the Uber percentages and those kinds of very clean, very kind of easy, almost sure thing pushes that, yeah, kind of Lolly Squad were a little bit more kind of open, but not quite. But in terms of the games, me and Nuze were talking about it. Do you want to?
Yeah, so there was quite a few parallels to be drawn between both of the teams. I think one of the main things was, especially in the late games, or the late stages of the game for Ascent, but for most of it for Weebtunnel Tactics, they were more focused on nullifying disadvantages before making use of any advantages they have, just to be on the safe side. So anytime they were on, say they would have like, I don't know, 1 or 2 players of an advantage, but they were down on Uber, they'd worry more about the fact that they were down on Uber than they were up on players, you know, that kind of thing. Ascent were a bit more flexible in that regard. They were a bit more aggressive quite early on, but we saw the same thing across both of the maps where Ascent got early rounds, and once they had that 2-round cushion, they were playing a bit more safe in the way that Weebtunnel Tactics were. That's the time that you really want to be playing that conservative playstyle. Once you've got the cushions and you want to play very stifling and limit what your opponents can do, it works a lot better when you've got rounds on the board. But Weebtunnel Tactics, they were trying to do that from the get-go, and once they got 1 round down, they didn't really adjust their approach. 2 rounds down, they didn't really adjust their approach. It was only when time started to put pressure on them that they tried to be aggressive, and they did have some good plays. Like there was one play on Snake Quarter where Gink peeks out from lower on last and headshots Babs. Yeah. And it does, like, they do have the capacity to make these big plays. Yep. But they're waiting too long for those opportunities to show up, and it's really limiting what they can do.
I feel you. We can bring up logs, I believe. We can maybe break down each map individually, starting out with the process log here. And, you know, I mean, this was a 4-0. I usually question, you know, what can you pick up from a 4-0, but I mean, what sticks out to you in terms of any of the pure numbers, or is there anything that sticks out? Some people were commenting on the line of Jimbot. He got off to kind of a shaky start, but there's a lot you can pick out.
I think a lot of the players on Weebtunnel Tactics kind of have pretty set roles. Like Jimbot and Bloodis are the 2 quite pockety targets. They like to stick with the medic and stay alive. But Ignis, Tobbs, and Gink are more of the playmakers. Tobbs uses quite a bit of the banners, but like they all stick to their roles. I think the thing that stands out to me in terms of the game, and I guess it's reflected fairly well in the stats, both soldiers for both teams, they were playing a similar kind of way in regards to how much they valued their lives. But Tobbs and Ignis were doing it in a much more passive way, whereas Polygon and Samsky were playing much more aggressive. I think me and eepily talked about that quite a bit, and I feel like that was one of the real difference makers between these teams. And you can see in the stats that Tobbs and Ignis don't have, I mean, both of them together just outfrag Polygon alone.
Just barely, yeah.
Yeah, and the damage stats are the same, the deaths are more or less the same.
Yeah, I mean, eepily, how about for deaths for medics? 1 death by Babs versus 10 for Menti. I mean, doesn't that say a ton?
The thing is, I think you can relate it directly to the soldiers. Yeah. Is that the soldiers had an insane amount of deaths on the red team because, you know, there's no nice way of saying about it. They were very unimaginative with a lot of their force attempts. There was maybe 2 or 3 possible times where Babs would be walking through choke and there would be a lone soldier from the red side jumping from rollout. That is literally divs, Div 5, Div 6 basics for beginners. That's just like the expected thing.
Yeah.
Literally every team who's played the game more than a couple of seasons knows that if you walk through a choke and you've got uber advantage, you've got to expect the jumpers.
Yeah.
So literally, because of how predictably these soldiers were playing, and because they could play this predictable way and get denied every time with almost complete focus, like, to go with what nuze said, Ascent would have what was reasonably predictable, or at least reasonably easy to deny soldier plays, but the rest of the team would move forward and support those soldiers to allow them to do more, to actually make something out of the distraction.
Yep.
Lolly Squad would send the soldiers in and would be like, well, you guys just got to get it done, basically. We're going to go. Half the time, by the time the soldier jumped from rollout, the rest of the team's inside one, inside last.
It felt like it got worse and worse in that regard. Like, on Snake, it wasn't as bad process. There were several times where it looked like a 6v1, one player of Weebtunnel Tactics trying to do something against every one of Ascent, and they had 3 players doing it one after another. And it just doesn't work like that in a team game.
Yeah.
And a team arena FPS. It's so easy to just focus fire one guy if he's the only person that you see, the only red thing on your screen.
Yeah.
But if they were to go in together, even just delay that play by a few seconds to coordinate it, I feel like they'd have a much better opportunity at getting something to happen. But they were just doing it a bit too safe. And
to go with that as well, like I said, you would argue maybe the whole reason Lolly Squad don't move the rest of their team forward to help their soldiers more is because they're trying to play super safe.
Yeah.
But Ascent is still trying to play super safe. They're managing to bring their people forward, and there's zero reason for them to ever stop that because Lolly Squad couldn't ever punish it.
Yeah.
They'd bring the rest of the team in quite a few times, actually. Ascent would manage to bring both their soldiers out, take a huge amount of position. The rest of the team would move out, and there'd be no punish on the soldiers, really. There'd be no punish on the rest of the team. There's nothing to stop them from taking this more aggressive positioning.
Yeah. It's kind of like you got to play to win.
Well,
really.
More or less. And the thing is, when you're playing from that far behind, like I said, you can put down Snake Water almost completely. I think you can put down to the first couple mids.
Yeah, do we have time for the Snake Water log? Maybe we could pull that up and see if there's anything we can glean from that. But go on, sorry.
Well, just if you looked at the first Snake Water mid, Weebtunnel were almost entirely committed with both their soldiers dealing with the high ground. They wanted to take high ground, they wanted to have that positioning and win the mid off of that. But Ascent basically just sent both their soldiers super deep. They didn't really care about the high ground. Like, their mid strategy didn't really revolve around maintaining position for that long. As long as they could get their soldiers super deep, trust that they would do enough damage, make enough of a distraction, more mids than not, they'd end up killing the medic, and then keep their own medic alive. That's all they really cared about. And playing like that, it doesn't matter if the other team has the high ground, because you're going for these deep bombs. So all that would happen is Red would take all the height, they'd take the position, they'd lose their medic, they wouldn't have heals, and then Ascent could just play a slightly slower mid from there on and just completely crush them.
The stat comparison we made on process is valid here on the logs as well for Snake. If you look at the soldiers for both teams, they have, I think it's the same amount of deaths if you add them together as both soldiers, but the soldiers of Ascent have, I think it's 12 more frags in total. I'm just
something like
that.
Yeah.
Yes, around that.
Twitch
like at least
chat will
10,
tell us the exact
at
number.
least 10
I'm sure.
frags more together, and it's like when you're getting the same amount of deaths, but your soldiers together are making 10 more frags than the enemy
just
team.
more efficient play.
Yeah, and I think it does come off the back of that. They're playing more as a unit and trying to support their soldiers. So, there's damage in the same places, whereas there's a lot more. Like, you look at Jimbot, or Fia, as a lot of people call him, and he stands out individually. He's the one getting a lot of frags as an individual, but I don't think there's a lot of frag. You can see he has 6 assists. Like, it doesn't stand out to me that there's too much focus fire going on for those guys, but yeah, I don't know.
One thing I was wondering is, and I'm especially thinking it as I look at the log, was Gink was on Sniper for so much. He had 3 headshots, and it was good, but were they almost just basically down a man for too long?
It's interesting. I think what I saw to be the case in a few situations, again, they're not really going for a kind of approach where they force people into Gink's sightlines, where he gets easy shots. They were using him almost as if he was a roamer going for a solo bomb.
Just asking him to just execute.
He would just run out in the middle of a choke, knowing he's going to die, in the hopes that he gets a shot off before he does. And he did do it 1 or 2 of the times, but
like consistently, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
It was the same on process. All of these elongated Uber versus Uber, trying to push out of their last or push into a last, they'd get Gink on Sniper. They'd trust him way too much to make these hero plays. The snarky hopping around a corner, headshotting a medic. And that's just not going to happen consistently. And
Yeah.
once that stopped working, they had nothing to fall back. Well, stopped working. It never really started working. Once they realized that, they had nothing to fall back on. I said it was same kind of thing I mentioned before. It was a bit of a lack of imagination when it came to the plays. I would guess, coming from high, you know, kind of being the big fish in a small pond, they were more able in previous games to punish teams easier. Teams would make much more obvious mistakes in terms of positioning, that they were able to play a super control-y game and just focus on the enemy's mistakes. But now they're going against these teams who won't be making the same mistakes as a high team.
Yeah.
They're lacking creativity in making some kind of advantage for themselves.
It does feel like that's a big difference when it comes to playing aggressively and trying to capitalize on advantages. I feel like the Ascent guys, their individuals just had better positional play, and they kind of knew how to play around and push forward together.
Do you think it's a confidence issue
yeah,
almost?
I guess it's like, you know, things like taking high ground as a soldier, or playing ahead of your demo as scouts, or, you know, that kind of thing. Whereas the guys on Weebtunnel Tactics, when they were trying to play aggressively, it didn't feel like they had as good of a read on the situation, as good just natural instincts as where to go and who to shoot, that kind of thing. And as much as it can be a team issue, I think the individuals just don't have the same experience as Ascent, because Ascent obviously have been playing against the best teams in Europe this past season. Weebtunnel Tactics are playing against high teams. They have been scrimming quite a few Prem teams, as far as I'm aware, this season, but
it's not the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Did you guys get the sense that there was any kind of like, you know, the first match of the day, you're kind of like feeling each other out, and you're kind of there's a little bit of nerves and that kind of thing, or do you think it was just a straight up, you know, a very good team versus a good team?
I was expecting Ascent to be worse, if I'm honest, because I thought going in with Elikor playing on demo in place of Adiski, I don't know how much they've been practicing with him recently, but I would have thought that would be quite a lot to adjust to, so that the first game of LAN would be, you know, kind of tricky for them. But it looks like he's fitting in the role quite well with the team, and they were playing pretty good. That being said, they were doing some things that I don't think, or some mistakes that they wouldn't be making were Adiski in his place. Like on Snakewater, they were trying to push last through shutter on even Uber situations with a solo demo Uber. And they just couldn't get anything done. I think it was 2 or 3 times that they tried that, and I don't think Adiski would be doing the same thing. So I think there are chinks in the armor here that the better teams can chip away at, but I just don't think we saw Weebtunnel Tactics in a position to exploit that.
Did you feel any shakiness or no?
You could probably argue that would lend, that would kind of explain a little bit why both teams were so passive. Like I said, they really didn't want to push off anything unless it was a absolutely huge, you know, talking like 50-60% Uber advantage a lot of the time. Maybe that would explain that, but from what I've seen from at least Lolly Squad in the past, they have tended to play that kind of way before, and in general, I'd expect a team missing their kind of glue and foundation to kind of be slightly less willing to constantly be pushing forward, at least on the first day of this kind of LAN, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, there is such thing, you know, you kind of settle in as you go along, don't you? Yeah.
Well, it makes sense, and I'm hoping, considering the way we saw things this game, it's a very good controlling team, clearly, Ascent is, but I'll be interested to see what happens once they start going against teams that can force them into dodgy situations, because this is always a problem with that ultra-conservative playstyle. When you start going down a couple rounds, you need things that you can pull out the bag, otherwise you have no way of getting back in the game.
Yeah.
And that's not a way to play.
Another thing that's worth mentioning, I mean, these 2 teams are 2 of the teams in the invite bracket with the least LAN experience. Ascent, I mean, most of their players in Prem were Prem debutants. And Weebtunnel Tactics, I think only 2 of them have come to LANs before. So yeah, I don't know, I would expect them to get quite a bit better as the LAN goes on, but maybe I'm being optimistic.
We'll see how it plays out. Probably some teams will get a lot better, and some teams will, I don't know, stay the same, not get any better. But at any rate, listen, we're just about ready for another series. We've got 2 new casters at the casting desk, and we're going to be back, obviously, for more analysis and whatnot.